Hey, welcome. So today we're jumping into a really big question. How on earth do scientists study something you can't see or touch, the human mind? To turn psychology from just guesswork into an actual science, researchers have to rely on a very specific toolkit. So come on, let's open it up and see what's inside.
And yeah, this is the central challenge, right? We all have thoughts, we have feelings, we have behaviors, but how can we measure them scientifically? How do we get past just talking about them and start gathering real, solid evidence?
This quote just nails it. Psychology isn't just about asking these deep, philosophical questions about the mind. Nope, it's a science, and it's dedicated to finding concrete answers. And to do that, you need a really rigorous, structured approach. And that brings us to our first huge point. To find those reliable answers, psychologists have to operate like any other scientist, and that means leaving hunches and personal opinions at the door and embracing a systematic method. This right here gets to the absolute heart of it. On one side, you've got guesswork. It's subjective, it's messy, it's totally tangled up in personal bias. But on the other side, you have the scientific method, which is the bedrock of psychology. It's structured, it's objective, and it's all based on evidence. That is the crucial difference between just an opinion and a real scientific conclusion. Okay, so how do they actually do it? Well, the best way to think about it is that every psychologist has a toolkit, and it's filled with different tools for different jobs. So let's take a look at what's in there. Inside this toolkit, we find 5 main tools. We've got observation, the experiment, the survey, the interview, and the case study. Now, each one has a very specific purpose, and a good psychologist knows exactly which one to pull out for the right problem. First up, we have the observation method. And look, this is way more than just people watching at a coffee shop. It's the systematic watching and recording of behavior, usually in a totally natural setting. Think of someone like Jane Goodall, living with chimpanzees to understand their social lives. The key here is that the researcher tries not to interfere at all, so they can see how people or animals actually behave. So with this method, the trade-offs are pretty clear. The huge plus is that you're seeing genuine, real-world behavior. It's authentic. But the downsides are pretty big too. The observer's own biases can easily creep in, and more importantly, you can only see what people do. You have no idea what they're actually thinking or feeling on the inside. Next up is the experiment. This is often called the gold standard of science. And why is that? Well, because it's the only method that can really truly show cause and effect. What a researcher does is change one specific thing, let's say the amount of sleep a person gets, to see how it affects another thing, like their performance on a memory test, all while keeping every other factor exactly the same. The upside is pretty obvious. It's super scientific and can give you very precise results about what causes what. But the limitation is that the controlled lab setting can feel really artificial. People might not act naturally, and some questions, for ethical or practical reasons, you just can't study this way. All right, now for a tool that's all about scale, the survey. If you need to know what thousands of people think about, say, a political issue or a new phone, you can't possibly interview all of them. So a survey, usually a questionnaire, is the go-to method for collecting a whole bunch of data on attitudes and opinions really fast. The strengths here are huge. You can reach a massive number of people, and it's pretty cheap to do. But there are some major catches. People might not give totally honest answers, and the data you get can be a bit superficial. You might learn what people think, but you don't really learn why they think it. So, if surveys give you breadth, the interview method is all about depth. This is a direct, one-on-one conversation that lets a researcher ask follow-up questions and really dig much deeper into a person's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. With an interview, the information you get is incredibly rich and detailed, and the whole process is really flexible. But it's also super time-consuming. You just can't interview thousands of people this way. Plus, the interviewer's own style or even just their presence can influence the answers, which introduces a bit of bias. And our final tool is the case study. You should think of this one as the psychologist's magnifying glass. It's an extremely deep dive into a single person or a tiny group, and it's often used to understand rare conditions. This is how we learned so much from figures like Phineas Gage, the guy who famously survived an iron rod shooting through his brain, which taught us a ton about how the frontal lobe works. A case study gives you this incredible, in-depth understanding you can't get anywhere else. But its biggest weakness is that you can't generalize the findings. I mean, what's true for one really unique person isn't necessarily true for everybody else.
And the researcher's own interpretation can be pretty subjective.
So there you have it, this incredible toolkit. But just having the tools is only half the battle. The real skill of a great psychologist is knowing exactly which tool to choose for which question. At the end of the day, there is no single best method. It's all about trade-offs. If you absolutely need to prove cause and effect with high control, you've got to choose an experiment. If you want to understand one person's life in incredible depth, a case study is your best bet. And if you need to know what a whole population thinks, well, it has to be a survey. The choice always, always depends on the question you're asking.
And finally, there's one more layer here that applies to every single tool in the kit. It's a rule that can never, ever be broken. The research must be ethical.
This is completely non-negotiable. Psychology is the study of living beings, so researchers have this profound responsibility to protect their participants. That means getting informed consent, making sure everything is confidential, and treating every single person with dignity and respect. It's the moral foundation of the entire field.
So, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways. The first, and honestly the most important one, is this. Psychology isn't just common sense. It is a real science, and it's built on a solid foundation of systematic, evidence-based methods.
Second, remember there is no one-size-fits-all solution here. A researcher always has to match the method to the question they're asking. It's a really critical, strategic choice.
And third, don't forget that every single tool in that toolkit comes with its own set of pros and cons. A great researcher is someone who really understands these trade-offs and knows how to choose wisely.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. Understanding the human mind is such a delicate and complex job. It demands that we observe carefully, that we ask the right questions in the right way, and above all, that we conduct our search for knowledge with the absolute utmost ethical responsibility.